Salve, salve rapaziada, tranquilidade, como é que vocês estão? Douglas Gatto aqui na área, de volta com as reacts e dessa vez trazendo aí a nova Porsche de drift do piloto Chelsea Denofa. Mano, chegou com tudo pra arrebentar mesmo. A gente já tinha feito uma react aí de uma outra Porsche, se eu não me engano, em Abu Dhabi, em Dubai, alguma coisa assim, uma Porsche rosa, mas essa é diferenciada, essa anda que nem carro de drift de verdade. Vamos ver aí. Coloquei a legenda para vocês, mas acredito que não está aparecendo, não sei porquê.
So we found this Porsche 718 Cayman, and we immediately, it was such a good deal.
Como ele falou, é uma Porsche 718 Cayman, para quem não conhece muito de Porsche, né? Eu também não sou muito chegado a Porsche, conheço as GT3 RS, as GT2, enfim, mas os modelos mais clássicos, mais básicos, assim, eu já não conheço tanto, então é uma 718 Cayman e ele teve aí um bom negócio para conseguir pegar esse carro. Tava em Nova York aí mandaram pra RK Tunes pra passar no dinamômetro. E é 4x4? Dianteira? É 4x4? Não tô entendendo. Não tô entendendo.
So immediately Jordan jumps on it, adds 2 pounds of boost and a couple degrees of timing, and the clutch slips. So we were dealing with trying to tune it a little
Colocaram aí um pouquinho mais de potência, né? E a embreagem parece que começou a patinar. Baixar um pouquinho aqui que tá um pouco alto.
Wheel speed sensors, transmission gear speed sensors, all the things that basically Porsche puts in the car to allow you to drift, but not really completely unlock everything. So Jordan was instrumental in figuring that out so that we could get something that was basically fully unlocked and ready to be used.
Mano, e pra quem já viu no Instagram dele os vídeos que ele postou andando com esse carro, dá pra perceber que ele fez muita coisa legal. Como ele tava falando aí, a Porsche ela é cheia de sensores, né? Pra quê? Pra você ter uma direção segura, ou seja, você vai até conseguir fazer um drift, mas vai ser aquele drift travado, aquele drift seguro que você vai conseguir depois alinhar, ficar em linha reta, salvar o carro, né? Essa é a realidade. E aí, como a gente quer ter o carro 100% ali manual, né? 100%, como eu posso falar, você mesmo tem que dirigir o carro, né? Não uma máquina que tem que controlar. A gente tem que fazer todas essas modificações aí, tirar todos os sensores, mano, deixar um negócio no pelo, tá ligado?
So at this point, clutch is slipping. It's at Jordan's. He's disabled a lot of the things that we need, and I have not seen the car yet. So we go up to New York. We drove an event. And we picked up the car while we were there, and I was absolutely amazed at the quality of the car because we got such a good deal on the car and it made so much sense to purchase it that I was like,
como ele falou, pegou um preço legal aí, né? Ele conseguiu fazer um bom negócio e voltou a legenda aí.
Outside of the clutch slipping, there wasn't really a catch. So we got the car back, put it on the lift, and started looking at everything. And any of the areas of concern with the car, because it had a very, very small hit on the back right corner, but was fixed, there basically was no damage. And whoever had owned it previous and fixed it,
e outra, pra quem vai moer, né? Pode ser, pode ter uma batidinha aqui, ali.
Go over everything, can't really see anything, so we knew it was time to move forward. So we put the car on the lift and we started going through and scanning everything on the chassis. We realized that Porsche pretty much nailed this from a drifting perspective. I know it's for sure on accident, but the amount of anti-squat, the roll center, and basically the entire toe and camber curve in the back from the factory is almost perfect. Like there's almost no changes needed. And the changes that can be done literally by just spacing factory style arms. Because everything was really...
Mano, então que nem ele falou aí, né? Como a gente já viu os vídeos no Instagram, viu que o carro é muito fluido, provavelmente ele vai passar aí. Ele tá falando que a Porsche acidentalmente acertou um carro pra drift. E basicamente ele não precisa fazer setup nenhum de traseira, só alongar ali os bracinhos, né? Tanto os regulagens que já vêm de fábrica são muito boas. Olha lá.
SPL parts by their basically replacement parts that replace everything in Heim joints and give about an inch of adjustment on every aspect. So that way we could have the alignment that we want adjust the anti-squat, the toe, and some of the roll center, and that's really all we're going to need. Rear suspension is like the most important and cool.
Ou seja, mínimos detalhes de setup aí, né? Então,
I
mano,
think the stock length is right at about 21 or so inches total. It's pretty sick. Basically what that does is it allows the rear suspension and the tire to get planted further forward in the chassis, so that way you can adjust that arm to create how much anti-squat you'd like, how hard the tire hits the ground, and then control how fast the tire hits the ground with a shock. And this design is insanely simple stupid. So basically you have a toe arm, and it's going to do almost only toe because of the location of the arm. It goes here. And then you have the trailing arm set up, which is built out of a lower control arm that has a pivot. This will be the replacement of the actual trailing arm itself. So SPL did a really sick job of doing this, and you have misalignment spacers that go here that can tilt that arm up and down. Basically, they got that adjustable there. The length is adjustable. They've got adjustable holes here that will allow you to move the trailing arm in and out. I put it in the outer position because it's already farther in than the stock one. I don't need any more clearance.
ou seja, uma pecinha aí quase plug and play.
That's going to help a lot in the actual setting up of the car, changing the camber and toe curve a little bit. We got it installed.
Vai conseguir melhorar ainda a configuração dele, né?
I love it. I don't have obviously
E
a
com poucas modificações.
Trailing arm to give us a half-inch more of wheelbase, lower ball joint to the pivot point of the. I'll call this the trailing arm because it basically is traction trailing arm. I've got all of the anti-squat pulled out of it right now, and there's about an inch total of adjustment there, which is cool. That's in the factory setting. I bet we will cut this out and build a fixture that goes there and bolts to the body, so that way I can have 2 inches. It would be really sick because I am not going to compete in FD with this car probably, to do that and then put a giant threaded rod in there that went into the car. So if I wanted to adjust the anti-squat, I could just do it with, like, let's say a 24 mil wrench on the inside and just adjust the track bar, bud. And that would be really sick. It's definitely possible. Another way to do it would be just have something come out the side with the gear drive, but either way. So I've got that on there. I've got the
Ou seja, tudo isso é para conseguir fazer o controle ali da suspensão, né? Colocar a roda literalmente no chão, trazendo o grip, trazendo a tração necessária pra gente.
A little sensor rod, so that way it will still have its reading in the ECU, which we are going to pull data from and use. So here's the stock arm in comparison to the SPL arm setup.
Olha a diferença, né? Do original pelo da SPL aí.
I even used their little wrench. Cutest wrench ever. So that it wouldn't scratch it. Anyways. Stock arm versus their arm setup, you can see no adjustment in the length of the arm or the ball joint location. There's no adjustment in an anti-squat because it's got a giant like ball joint type deal in there. And then no roll center adjustment in here. I've got all the roll center out of it right now because I want to play with the schematics of it and see how the camber and toe gain works, so I can move this around a little bit to change that. But in theory, this setting right here is kind of more direction I think that we want to be in. We'll see. But yeah, again, no adjustment there. And then it has this big giant hockey puck bushing in here, so there's going to be a bunch of adjustment in play there. So we didn't use that at all. It's solid mounted now, so this should be a lot better to move through its paces. So like I said, I'm really, really excited about it. One cool thing I thought that was neat, high clearance bolt that goes through here with the ball joint taper. So you're basically now just have your own bolt with a misalignment spacer in there that has a taper to the ball joint. Instead of having it be stuck or 2 pieces, you can just replace just the ball joint taper if you need to. Same thing with this bottom piece here. This bolt that goes all the way through has a ball joint taper in it, which is nice. And then you got all your roll center adjustment here. So you're looking at about an inch of roll center adjustment there. About an inch of anti-squat adjustment there. And
ou seja, já ficou um carro melhor do que muitos carros que a gente tem de drift aqui no Brasil. Sem quase nem preparar, e é óbvio, né, que é uma Porsche 718.
And having the roll center like this, and I'm putting all the side bite in the car because that's kind of my thought process in the beginning with this car, is to put as much side bite as we can into it, because the mid-engine, it's going to have a little bit of a pendulum effect, not very much. But it's going to have plenty of forward drive. I don't think we're going to have any limitations on the forward drive. So let's get all the side in it, and then we can start pumping the forward in it with the shocks, the anti-squat. Continuously working on the rear, because this is a mid-engine car, we ended up going and pulling the gearbox apart and welding the differential that's in it. So it comes factory with a differential that is insanely simple to weld. We've got the gearbox.
Mano, como ele falou ali, o motor dessa Porsche, pra quem não tá ligado, é um motor central. E isso pode ser que seja algo muito benéfico no drift, porque vai dar aquela equilibrada de peso, mas também é muito diferente aí toda a parte de diferencial, de câmbio, né? Como é central, então as coisas já estão meio que desalocadas ali do nosso costume de carro, né? Que a gente vê no drift. Então, ele tá falando aí que é bem simples de soldar esse diferencial. Olha lá.
And then you can weld the diff and put it back in. It holds itself as a housing with all of the lash and everything's set already. And you just pop it back in. So that's a really cool feature. I kind of had a quick look at these stub shafts too. Less than ideal in size and strength. So we're definitely
É aquela parada, né, mano? É um carro que ninguém nunca desenvolveu, então ninguém nunca conhecia, nunca sabia o que poderia dar um carro desse. Se você pega um carro pra montar, né, vou botar mesmo uma Porsche no drift. E, mano, quando você começa a desbravar ali na realidade, você começa a ver que é muito possível e às vezes até mais fácil, mano. Até porque já entrega uma potência boa, um torque bom, o carro tem um centro de gravidade bom. O motor né, é central ali, então ajuda também no equilíbrio de peso e tudo mais. O diferencial e o câmbio aparentemente são coisas fáceis de mexer, que nem ele falou. O diferencial é fácil de soldar, a caixa de câmbio deve ser fácil de retirar também, pelas posições e tudo mais. E sem contar, né, a tração que o carro já coloca no chão. Muito sinistro, mano.
You can see this gear pump right here for the oil pump, so that it can pump oil through the cooler to cool it. It's been really cool figuring this car out and finding all the little tricks of the trade so far. We pulled the gearbox out because we wanted to investigate more, but after we realized that when you buy one of these and you want to build it, you can probably weld the diff in 45 minutes. Continuing with the gearbox, we went ahead.
Mano, tá vendo? É um carro simples. Simples não, né? Mas é um carro que tem potência. É um carro que em 45 minutos você consegue soldar o diferencial dele. É um carro que já tem as suspensões boas, tudo bom, mano. Então é muito mais fácil do que você comprar um carro pra desenvolver. Mano, isso pode ser um problema. A caixa de câmbio sendo com a relação um pouco longa pode prejudicar ali, né, em baixas, né, em pista de mais baixa velocidade ou em curvas que você tenha que reduzir. Mas também nada que botar uma primeirinha ali no empurre, né?
Now we have to worry about the clutch. Obviously it slipped right off the bat, so we know we needed something a lot more robust than the factory, because the clutch, when we took it out, still had plenty of meat left on it. It's basically meant to only hold the amount of power it makes stock. So the minute you start making some more power, you're going to need a new clutch. So we went with Comp 1 clutch, and they built us out a completely redesigned setup with a single mass flywheel and their clutch and disc. It took quite a few tries to get it right because of the spacing with the differential and everything inside of the gearbox is very tricky, and it has to be absolutely perfect to work well. So on our third shot of getting a flywheel and disc setup in, we ended up being able to get it right, but only after we changed the diaphragm and a bunch of other things to get it to work well with the Porsche clutch. So
que doideira, né? No começo do vídeo... Monstro. No começo do vídeo ele falou que, né, que a embreagem dele tava dando umas patinadas ali no Dino. Quando eles fizeram um remap, ele colocaram um pouquinho a mais de potência. E então ele teve que, né, reconstruir ali algo que a gente também faz aqui no Brasil, né, com bastante facilidade aí. Juntamente com a nossa Celebrity Power, vocês estão ligados? Com certeza eles conseguiriam fazer alguma coisa ali pra ajudar o Chelsea Denofa. Engraçado, né, que, mano, esse carrinho ele tem uma pegada zetinho assim, né? Então, mano, vai ser um projeto que, se bem desenvolvido
So then we
mesmo,
ran into our
acho que
first
fica
major
muito
problem.
competitivo.
I went out to the car one day to move it, and it wouldn't start. And obviously, being a new car, having a lot of CAN bus and tons of wiring, you immediately just plug in a scanner and start trying to figure out what's wrong. Doing all the same stuff, basically clutch in, turn the key, park assist, parking brake, front level control, because I don't have that anymore.
Ah.
Power steering, which nothing was really touched there. Stability management, which is parking brake control, gateway control. Lots of codes from all the things we had already disabled to try to get the wheel speed and the actual power band to go all the way to the rev limiter. I had the car on the lift, went over everything, and basically decided, hey, I'm going to send this to someone who knows what's going on with Porsche stuff. And Precision Sport over in Oviedo, they have a guy there that's really well versed in Porsche stuff. I took it over to
Tem
him.
coisa que
He
não dá
called
pra
me 20
fugir,
minutes
né?
after I
Tem que
dropped it
levar
off and
ali.
said, there's a ground missing from the motor to the chassis. Connected it, it
Ah.
fired right up. So it was really good that I only wasted about 4 hours trying to diag it. It took him 20 minutes to put it on the lift and see. I don't know if it was a common problem for it to come loose or whatnot, but the nut had completely fallen off and the ground had completely come disconnected. So I was really happy to get a
É,
call, have it fire
ele
right
não tava
back up.
conseguindo ligar o carro ali só por conta de um fio de aterramento, né? Mas tem coisa que nem ele tava falando, não tem muito que fugir, né? Como ele não é especialista em Porsche, não é do meio deles, né? Tem que levar pra alguém que manja pra tirar ali esses bloqueios, né? Que não deixa o carro colocar toda a potência no chão, não deixa o carro subir toda a pressão ali que subiria, né? Enfim.
And get right back to work.
Ou esses
Obviously,
problemas
being a
de
drift
ligar,
car,
né?
number one
Ou
priority
problemas
is
de
the steering feel
sensores.
and the geometry. So one of the things that's interesting about this car is it does have a full electric rack. Porsche has done a really good job of designing that to keep a lot of feel, but we wanted to amplify that as much as possible because it's always easy to bring it back. So we went with SLR for the front steering, and we're using an entire billet upright that reuses basically nothing
Já
from the
colocou
Porsche.
já o
It basically
kitizada na
converts
frente.
everything over to similar to E36 geometry in the front with the caster trail and everything in the knuckle. And then we use F30 style brakes, brake rotor with the Porsche caliper on there. We might upgrade the braking system later to get a little bit more weight out of it, but for right now, it's on there. It's got adjustable Ackerman, adjustable trail, and everything bolts together. And it's very modular, so we can basically click print after changing something and print little pieces to bolt on to change the entire front steering geometry.
É,
We ended up with about 65, 66 degrees of steering angle, and we were
bom,
able to tuck it under the stock
muito
fender with
bom.
like 8 degrees of front camber. It will actually work really, really well because at the amount of angle that I drive at the most, which would be like 50 to 60, the tire is really, really flat, which is a little bit different than what we would do in the past because we'd normally be worried about jacking a lot of weight onto the rear at high angles. But because of the way the front suspension is designed, the weight distribution, I think it's a really good stab at the first attempt.
Que louco, mano. Esse projeto eu quero ver ele empurrando o pessoal.
It calls for 0-40. I think that
O bagulho
maybe we
deve
can try
ser
1060 in it
sinistro.
after we do some testing, but I think this is going to be good for right now to stick with good oil that is the OEM spec.
Colocando aquele óleozinho,
So we ended up getting,
5W40.
some Recaros for this. I went against the Hans ones, especially in the beginning, to get some testing done. I felt like it was best to do like one of these simpler ones that allow some head clearance. Once we start doing some tandem and stuff, we'll probably end up going to something with a halo. But the pole position seemed to be a good one just to start with. Fitment's good. We used a mount, just an off-the-shelf one off the internet. The seems pretty low. We got plenty of room here. Once the cage shows up, we'll be able to finally place that. Handbrake location be somewhere in here. Looks like there's lots of rib nuts in the chassis too, so we'll be able to probably just make a plate that's pretty large off of that. And we're going to use the stock column for right now. That way we can get everything positioned. It has electric steering rack still, so we'll use all that stock stuff, utilize that for the crossbar, so we have lots of adjustability. There's like 3-inch in and out and up and down on the column, so lots of adjustment. I wasn't able to find it.
É uma caixa de direção já boa, que nem ele falou, uma caixa elétrica que você consegue sentir bastante, né, o chão ali. E não precisa fazer grandes modificações, só que na parte interna ali, como é um carro de drift, vai ter que fazer toda a parte de gaiola, instalar um freio de mão, fazer algo bonitinho ali pra ficar o mais original, mais
Found that
apresentável de
981 doors would
interna.
fit. So obviously we don't have the door handle on right now, but you can see the door handle cutout is very different. But everything else, the entire door, the mirror, everything's identically the same. So I put these doors on there for now because we're going to ship those up to my buddy in North Carolina. He's going to make some carbon doors so we can save some weight. Plus, those doors are about $1,000 to $1,500 a pair, and for carbon, I'll be around the same amount. So we're going to do that instead and save a lot of weight. These doors are only like, I think I paid $600 for these, both of them together. So a lot cheaper, so a good placeholder for now. Also, it's fun that if you're building one of these, you can get doors that are simpler and cheaper. So being that this is a test mule, I really wanted to keep it very like Porsche oriented. And the reason being is like I want it to be something that guys who are into Porsches appreciate and like. And I think the balance of having a nice interior drift car is cool, A, for drifters and the style of it, but B, keeping like that Porsche race car feel to it. They always kept mostly stock dashes in the car. They integrated a lot of the factory pieces.
Isso ele tá
So we wanted to
certo
do
em
that
partes, em partes. Porque, que nem ele tá fazendo aqui, o Thiaguinho Romano já tentou fazer aqui no Brasil, quando trouxeram ali uma M3, bem na época dela mesmo, se eu não me engano, ele trouxe zero da Europa, câmbio manual e tudo mais, e ele até entrou em contato ali com a BMW falando, né, a mesma situação. Ele queria que o pessoal que gostasse de BMW se interessasse pelo carro dele, se interessasse em fazer voltas rápidas, enfim, vender ali algum produto pro pessoal que já gosta de BMW. E na época não deu muito certo. Pode ser que hoje dê certo, pode ser que o pessoal de Porsche vá gostar, mas eu acredito que, mano, quem gosta muito de Porsche normalmente não é do MOI, né? Vamos falar assim. Então, não sei, o MOI é diferente na realidade, é um MOI mais de
It is a test
racing
mule, and we're
mesmo.
not super worried about how light we can
Mas,
get it.
vamos
It's much
ver.
more important to have something that's like very cool and exciting and keeps me intrigued in what's happening. So we ended up calling cage kits.
Só
And
esse
they came and
volantinho já
scanned
dá
the whole
outra
car,
cara
so we
já,
have a
hein,
really,
mano.
really tight fitting
Eu não
cage
gosto de
that's
volante
safe
original em carro,
and
mano.
very well planned out. It is the best planned out cage I've ever done and seen. Like everything fits perfect. The few things that I wanted to change to keep engine access
Projetinho
and all of that much
3D.
easier, they were
Cadu da GRT faz isso aqui no Brasil, mano.
able to
Muito
do.
louco. Quando ele vai fazer os
All the
projetinhos
fitment of the
dele, o
parts
bagulho
were
fica
absolutely
perfeito.
perfect. The only tricky thing we had is there's a couple parts on this car that are completely aluminum where the cage would have to land. So a lot of it's welded in and some of it's bolted in with FIA related bolts. The steering wheel make you feel right at home.
Yep.
I didn't have another wheel to put in it. Look at this thing. It's like a race car now.
É.
That's it, dude. This is you. Look, you can floor it already. You won't, but you can. Okay, so things are coming along. Clutch
Mano.
works. We got
Ficou
our
sinistro, hein?
energy steering wheel
Ó o freiozinho de
now
mão
on.
ali, ó. Só não sei como ele vai puxar.
Old, very old steering wheel on there right now because I haven't received my new one yet, but it goes right on. Steers. Got our console done. The handbrake is finished mounting with everything.
Tá.
This still works. Everything's good there.
Ah,
There it
tá.
did start. There we go.
Eu acho que tem um espacinho ali, mas
Oh yeah.
ele
all
vai
the
deixar um
turbo
pouquinho mais pra
noise
cima ali, com
and
certeza.
all of the warning. Don't worry about any of
Aviso, aviso, aviso.
them. We're good, bro.
Carro com muita eletrônica é assim, não tem muito o que
Stop.
fazer, né, mano?
Is 97.4 inches. We have been an overachiever at everything we've built so far in this shop. Let's see where we're at here. 99.5. We only stretched 2 inches. How's that a thing? Only 2 inches. We'll have to see where we're at and make some adjustments. Womp. Keeping most of the interior, the navy, the dash, the
Ficou
center console, and all
sensacional,
that.
mano.
Tucking the handbrake in so you don't see the master brake bias controllers behind.
tá bem
and it's
lá
kind
pra
of just
trás.
a nice car that you get in, and the content from the inside of the car should look like we're in kind of like a factory Porsche.
Mano do
So I'm really
céu.
excited about how it fits. The Recaro seat fits really nice. It's comfy. It's low. It's exactly where we need it. We were able to just buy the mounts online directly so that they went in perfect, centered, adjustable.
Que projetinho sensacional. A legenda tá fugindo aqui de vez em quando, não sei porquê.
So Porsche did a really good job on this 2.5 liter turbo. We haven't got to turn the power up yet past where we are, but it does really well in the mid-range, and that's the most important thing. A lot of people might be like, why didn't you build a GT4? Or why didn't you do something, a different engine? This engine is actually extremely strong. People have made 600 plus on the stock engine, and the response in the mid-range is crazy, like 500 plus foot-pounds of torque at 3,500 RPM. So, and it revs all the way to 75 pretty much stock. A lot of people might say there's a better
um motor robusto, forte, né? Aguenta pancada.
Motorsports grade engines. But it's really hard to beat the power band of this engine, being that it's on and popping at 3,000 and goes all the way to 75 in basically stock form. Whereas the GT4 and some of the other motorsports NA engines, while they have a lot of response, as people would say, we're already spinning the tires to that point. So that instant hit of power, like while you're cracking the throttle open, doesn't quite matter. The torque that hits immediately with the turbo car is much more important. So while a GT4 with a tune, headers, exhaust that you spend a ton of money on might make, 370 foot-pounds of torque and 450 horsepower, with a tune and a downpipe, this will make 500 foot-pounds of torque and 450 horsepower. We'll probably end up putting a bigger VGT, like factory replacement style turbo on it that could put us up to about 600. Right now it'll be right at about 400. The intercooler and all of the cooling system at this point we haven't tested yet, so we'll see and how that works and maybe improve as we go. I realize it's kind of neat. They put the flange right here for running a center radiator too, and they just have a cap that goes, so when you want to put a center radiator in, so you have 3 radiators, then you can just pop that out and put a hose on.
Rapaziada, aquele videozinho, né, básico, padrão.
Is obviously if we get a hit here.
Acredito que ele não vai andar com o carro ainda, né? Ele tá só apresentando o mesmo projeto e, mano, a gente tá vendo que o bagulho tá insano.
Radiator inside of the frunk. That will be, at this plan, is to just tilt it a little bit, cut out the bottom side of this and build a duct, and then come up and exit out the back side of the hood. It will be okay for testing, and we can get some idea of what we need to update, but probably after the first test day...
Vai fazer o caminho do vento, né?
In terms of the exhaust, it has a very weird exhaust system from the factory that goes dual over the axles for clearance, and I think that's simply for the tire clearance. So what we did was a 3.5-inch stainless side pipe that has a V-band, and then it connects to 3.5-inch Taycan bends to go...
A única parada desses carros é que é tudo muito apertado, né, mano? É um conjunto muito apertado pra você trabalhar, pra você ter que fazer alguma manutenção ali, mano.
Over the axle, and it ends at the axle simply because we want to keep as much clearance as possible and to make it as serviceable as possible in the back of the car. I think that will kind of help the sound of the car as well, not having it be able to crackle as much off of like things outside because it will bounce off the floor first. One of the coolest things about this build is the unknowns. I didn't scale this car on purpose.
Não sabe o que vai virar, né?
I thought it was going to be heavy, and I didn't want to be so conscious about the weight in the very beginning of the build. I wanted to keep it as simple as possible and focus like eyes on the prize type of thing. I went on the forums, did some Googling for the weight distribution and figuring it out, so that way we built it in a way that made sense. It's 2610 without me in it, and right at 2800
não sei
in it, which
quanto isso daria em quilos.
Pounds lighter than I thought. So I'm really excited about the weight.
Mas não parece ser muito não.
We weren't really focused on the actual weight. We just wanted to build the car out and have it be the way it needed to be, simple, keeping a lot of the things factory on it. It still has all of the factory CAN bus wiring in it, most of the modules. Basically everything besides a stereo is still in the car. Carpet from the front forward, and we really have just put lighter parts on the car. We haven't really removed very much. So to see it be at 2800 with me in it,
em vez de tirar, né,
peças
eles trocaram.
Probably being in the 2500 range with a driver. Porsche to me is a brand that's always had kind of a different outlook on everything. The rear engine car is not good, like straight up. The mid-engine car is much better, but Porsche said, we're going to make this rear engine car work, and they kept working at it and pushing it and training drivers and figuring out how to make it one of the best cars. And now it truly is one of the best cars. When you drive a 70s or 80s or 90s Porsche, it's a bit of a handful, and they've kind of brought that back. And I think that's what's important with drifting is it's the same thing. Like, drifting is a bit of a handful. It's kind of a thing where you're not supposed to do it, but we're going to keep working at it to make it perfect. So to me, the Porsche heritage matches drifting really, really well. So in 2024, I really wanted to kind of reinvigorate my drifting. And for me, drifting has always been about the evolution of everything, like tires, suspension, chassis, tracks, drifting as a whole, grassroots. Like, just being able to grow all of that is like my kind of purpose, at least for drifting. At least I see it that way. So throughout Formula Drift, throughout my career, I've always been just trying to get to that next level, that next thing. Sometimes that's bit me in the ass and I've lost because of it. But being ahead of the curve and pushing the boundaries is something that's been really important to me. And this Porsche 718 build, to me, is that next step of evolution.
Com certeza, mano. Com certeza pode ser um próximo passo aí para a evolução.
Really long time, so there's low entry costs and nicer, higher entry costs. And there's kind of a big umbrella of things that go on under this chassis itself. I think it's really important to do something like this with mid-engine and not the 911, because the 911 is this heritage crazy car, and this has kind of been the bastard car for a long time. And I think that's why this should be the next cool evolution of drifting.
E sem falar que, né, a evolução do drift tende a caminhar para carros mais modernos, carros que a gente vai conseguir ir lá na fábrica e comprar eles e aí fazer poucas modificações e conseguir andar já. Que nem os novos Supras aí que o pessoal já tá fazendo os esqueminhas para deixar ele com câmbio sequencial, mesmo ele sendo automático. Então, muitas coisas ainda vão estar por vir no drift e vamos ver essa passada do Chelsea Denofa lá no compound do Adam LZ. Vamos ver como vem anguladão. Tá lá. Ainda assim me parece um carro um pouco pesado. Talvez ele deve estar usando ali umas rodinhas 17, não sei, 18, eu não sei se ele falou. Se ele falou, eu esqueci. Mas acredito eu que se ele usasse ali uma roda 18 ou talvez até um perfil de pneu maior, deixaria o carro um pouquinho mais fluido. Vamos ver, mas ele tá tirando, né? Quem sou eu pra falar? Chelsea Denofa que tá andando. Pô, demorou, rapaziada? Se inscreve aí no canal, deixa o like, é um vídeo bem longo, mas, mano, muito da hora. E acredito que agora o Chelsea Denofa vai soltar aí mais vídeos dessa Porsche, né? Ele andando aí nos campeonatinhos, nos eventos, fazendo umas batalhinhas de treino e tudo mais, demorou? Então se inscreve aqui no canal pra não perder nada. E esse ano tem muita Fórmula Drift também com os BRs. E é isso. É nóis, falou, valeu e fui!